Good morning, everybody. So the shir that we had yesterday that I'd like you to summarize is really asking the question of what is hashkafa, what is philosophy. We had sort of a chaotic discussion about this, and it became very clear that a lot of people aren't really sure what philosophy is, and that's perfectly okay. And I expected to know what it is before we walk into the room. But I want to explain the difference between hashkafa, Jewish philosophy, and let's say the study of halacha or the study of chumash or the study of Gemara. What actually are we studying when we study Jewish philosophy? And to understand this, what the topic of hashkafa and philosophy is, I brought up a responsa of the Rambam. Responsa is the shaila and shuva. Somebody writes a question and the Rambam wrote an answer. And then we had a discussion about various questions, and then we started a question asked of the Rashba to really show halacha. So let's look at the Rambam that we discussed, and the Rambam said as follows. Okay, so the question that was asked in the Rambam is: there's a statement in the Gemara. The Gemara is found in a number of different places, the exact same statement, but it says that everything is in the hands of God. Except for one's Yira Shamayim. Yira Shamayim is sometimes, unfortunately, translated as fear of God. It's not about fear, it's awe of God. We're supposed to be awestruck about God. So it says that everything is in God's hands except for one's awe of God, which would seem to imply that my decision, let's say I just came back from Minyan, to go to Minyan early in the morning, or my decision to wear tefillin or not to wear tefillin is really in God's hands. Now, that seems strange, as God's the one pushing me to go. But it not only is it strange as an idea, but it's also completely contradicts one of the fundamental points of a Jewish hashkafa, of philosophy of the Torah, and that is the idea that we have bechira chafshus, we have free choice. If I have free choice, then it can't be that everything is in God's hands. So tshuva, the answer the Rambam said is as follows: Al masha marta. The idea that all of man's actions are not a decree by God, meaning that we have our own choice, is without a doubt the truth. We have the choice of whether to go to Minyan, whether to put on our tefillin or not, whether to daven with kavana. That's all of our choice. How to treat other people, that's all our choice, and there's no doubt about that. Therefore, the Rambam says, no sin lo schar im holech b'derech tova v'nifroim eno im holech b'derech ra. And therefore, God rewards us when we do mitzvos and punishes us when we don't do mitzvos or when we violate the Torah, right? Because therefore, it just only makes sense that the only way we have reward is if it was our choice whether to do something. It wouldn't make sense for God to force us to go to Minyan against our will and then reward us for that. Or the other way, force us to sin, let's say act disrespectfully to our parents, and then punishes us for that, even though that wasn't our choice. So the only way punishment and reward makes sense is if it's our choice. So now the Rambam has to answer explain this statement of the Talmud that everything is in the hands of God. So how does he explain it? Actually, the Rambam says all of our actions come down to our Yira Shamayim, to our awe of God. And everything, no matter how mundane, secular we think the decision that we're making, should I have a glass of orange juice or a glass of soda? Everything comes down to our Yiras Hashem, our Yira Shamayim. Everything comes down to our awe of God. But how does that make any sense? Because every one of our questions is driven by the desire to either become a better person or a worse person. Okay? And if I want to improve on myself, so every decision is going to lead to that improvement. And if my value, my guiding light is the Torah, so then really everything comes down to Yira Shamayim. So when that he says, so when the Gemara says that everything's in B'nai Shamayim, it doesn't actually mean that everything is in God's hands, because when the Gemara qualifies it by saying chutz me'Yira Shamayim, except for one's awe of God, what it's actually saying is that really everything's in our hands because everything comes down to Yira Shamayim. And that's how the Rambam answers the question. The next thing that we asked was, what are the differences between how, what, where, and why? And these three questions are about the mechanics of something, of how something works. How does it work? what does it do, and where is it found are all questions trying to explain the mechanics of something. They apply to questions of physics, of biology, of chemistry, even of history. But the question of why something happens, that's a question, that's a philosophical question. All four of these questions are valid, and they're all very important to have answers. One could even say that maybe even why is more important than the how, what, and where. But generally, we can never answer the how, what, and where, the why, until we have how, what, and where. Jewish philosophy comes to answer the why. Halacha is addressing how, what, and where. So when I want to know why God punished us, or why God took us out of Egypt, or why I have to pray, that's a Jewish philosophical question. When I want to know how many times I have to pray, what do I have to say when I pray, and where should I be when I pray, those are halachic questions. Our class is Jewish philosophy. So therefore, we're going to be asking the why. Okay, last thing that we covered was the question of the Rashba. Every time we do a mitzvah, we have to make a bracha beforehand, right? Before I blow shofar, I make a al tkiyah shofar. Before I shake a lulav, I make a al netilas lulav. Okay, so that's a general principle. The Rashba wants to know, how come we find in certain mitzvahs, like when I loan somebody money, or when I take somebody to court in a dispute, there are no brachos in front of that mitzvah. So what I want you to sum up is what we covered in this video. And I'll give you great extra credit if you can come up with your own answer to the Rashba's question. Okay, shalom.